Welcome back to EtherLink AI Insights. I'm Alex, and today we're diving into something that's going to reshape how enterprises operate across Europe and potentially beyond. We're talking about agentic AI and enterprise automation, and specifically, how organizations need to prepare for the EU AI Act's full implementation in August 2026. Sam, this feels like one of those inflection points where technology and regulation collide in real time.
Exactly, Alex. And that collision is happening in just over a year from now. What's fascinating is that agentic AI, these autonomous systems that can actually make decisions and execute tasks without constant human oversight, represents genuine competitive advantage. But here's the catch. Deploy them wrong, and you're looking at fines up to 6% of global turnover under the EU AI Act. So this isn't theoretical anymore. Organizations need a roadiness plan yesterday.
Let's ground this for people who might be thinking, okay, but what actually is agentic AI? How is it different from the chatbots we're already familiar with? Because I think a lot of people conflate the two.
Great question. A traditional chatbot is reactive. You ask it something, it responds. An agentic system? It's fundamentally autonomous. It can initiate workflows on its own, make decisions within defined parameters, learn from what happens, and adapt its strategy without asking you for approval every single time. Think of it less like a very smart assistant and more like a colleague who actually knows what they're doing and can operate independently.
So we're talking about systems that can handle complex, multi-step processes across entire departments without human intervention. That's genuinely powerful. But I can see why regulators are nervous. What does the current adoption picture look like?
Here's the gap that should keep every CTO awake at night. McKinsey found that 67% of enterprise leaders view autonomous agents as critical to staying competitive, but only 23% have actually operationalized them. So there's massive awareness but very little execution. And a lot of that hesitation is regulatory uncertainty. People are waiting for clarity on exactly what compliance looks like.
That makes sense. So let's talk about real-world impact. You mentioned in our research that Boeringer Ingleheim, the pharmaceutical company, actually deployed one of these systems. What did they do?
Right, so they built an agentic system specifically for supplier quality management. It monitors over 200 supplier documentation workflows autonomously, flags compliance deviations in real time, and escalates based on severity. The results were striking: 68% reduction in manual review time, 0 critical compliance oversights, and complete audit trails that actually satisfy EU AI Act documentation requirements. This is the real-world sweet spot, operational efficiency and regulatory readiness reinforcing each other.
That's compelling. And financial services are seeing similar wins, right?
Absolutely. Banks deploying agentic systems for anti-money laundering detection are reporting 45% faster transaction screening, 52% reduction in false positives according to Swift's data, and automatically generated risk assessments that tick boxes for both operations and compliance teams. It's not just efficiency theater. These systems are catching real problems faster while reducing the noise that compliance teams have to wade through.
Okay, so the business case is clear. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, the EU AI Act August 2026 deadline. Sam, what exactly happens on August 2nd, 2026?
That's when the full implementation kicks in, and here's what matters. Any high-risk AI system, and agentic systems operating in financial services, healthcare, employment, or criminal justice absolutely qualify as high risk, must be in full compliance. We're talking continuous compliance monitoring, explainability requirements, human oversight mechanisms, and comprehensive risk documentation. The regulatory bar is genuinely high.
And the penalty structure?
Up to 6% of global turnover for non-compliance. For context, that's the kind of fine that gets board attention immediately. But here's what EY found in their 2024 AI Governance Index. 74% of European enterprises don't have adequate governance infrastructure to meet that deadline. So we're looking at a massive readiness gap with just over a year to close it.
That's a huge number. So what does actual readiness look like? How do organizations structure their approach?
You have to embed compliance into the system design from day one, not bolt it on afterward. That sounds obvious, but most organizations are still treating governance as an afterthought. The foundation has 3 pillars. First, establish clear AI governance with defined decision hierarchies, audit trails, and override mechanisms so you can actually prove what the system did and why. Second, build a risk assessment framework. You need to understand which systems pose which risks in your specific context. And third, implement domain-specific solutions rather than generic approaches.
What do you mean by domain-specific? That sounds like it might be expensive or complex.
It's more nuanced than expensive. A financial services firm deploying agentic AI for transaction monitoring faces totally different risk vectors than a healthcare provider using agents for administrative scheduling. Domain-specific language models and governance frameworks account for those differences. Yes, you're building multiple systems rather than one universal solution, but that's actually cheaper and faster than forcing a square peg into a round hole and then scrambling to explain it to regulators.
So for an organization listening right now that's thinking about deploying agentic AI in the next year, what's the first concrete step they should take?
Map your risk landscape today. Identify which of your proposed agentic systems fall into high-risk categories under the EU AI Act. Then, and this is important, build your governance framework in parallel with your technical roadmap, not after it. You need legal, compliance, technical, and business teams working together from month 1. And pilot these systems in environments where you can actually observe and document their behavior at scale before they're customer-facing.
That parallel approach makes sense because you're learning the compliance requirements while you're learning the system capabilities.
Exactly. And honestly, organizations that approach it that way often find that the compliance requirements actually improve the system design. When you're forced to explain why an autonomous agent made a decision, you often discover that the decision logic itself needed refinement anyway.
That's a really interesting angle. So this isn't just about avoiding fines, it's about building better systems. Let me ask you the bigger picture question. For enterprises that get this right between now and August 2026, what's the competitive advantage?
It's substantial. You're looking at organizations that can operate autonomously at scale, handling hundreds of workflows, making real-time decisions, improving continuously, while having completely defensible audit trails and governance structures. Your competitors are either scrambling in August 2026 or they've had to slow adoption because they didn't plan ahead. The organizations that move now have a 12 to 18-month head start on both capability and compliance muscle.
And that's not trivial in fast-moving sectors like financial services or healthcare.
Not at all. In those sectors, a year of operational advantage, faster AML detection, better patient data management, whatever your use case is, that compounds. You're not just ahead on compliance, you're ahead on actual business performance.
All right, last question for you, and then we'll wrap. Are there any common mistakes you're seeing organizations make as they start this journey?
2 big ones. First, underestimating the governance piece. They focus on the AI model and forget that 60% of the work is audit trails, documentation, and human oversight mechanisms. Second, trying to build generic agentic platforms that work across all use cases. You end up with something that technically complies, but doesn't actually solve your business problems efficiently. Start narrow, solve it well, then expand.
Great advice. Sam, thanks for breaking this down. For our listeners who want the full depth on strategy, risk assessment frameworks, and implementation roadmaps, head over to etherlink.ai and find the complete article on agentic AI and enterprise automation. The August 2026 deadline is real, but so is the opportunity. Until next time, this has been EtherLink AI Insights.
Thanks, Alex. And to our listeners, start your readiness planning now. You'll thank yourself in 18 months.